Thank you, thank you. I'm gonna take Melissa with me everywhere I go because that was unbelievable. Thank you so much. Melissa is one of my heroes, so to hear your hero saying nice things about you feels really, really incredible. Did everybody get a financial journal? Yeah, yeah, anyone still need one? I have a bunch, so of course. You want two? Take a couple, yeah. Hey, there you go, there you go. As Melissa said, my name is Elaine. I am a CPA. I teach at CCAD, and my area of expertise is money for artists because it feels icky to talk about money. It's weird to have to kind of think about it in the context of your creativity, and it is completely overwhelming. And here's the secret. It's overwhelming no matter how rich you are or no matter how much you know or what your childhood experiences were. It's just really uncomfortable to talk about money. So what I do is take my knowledge and expertise and some of the things I've learned over the years and try to break it down and support artists and creative individuals in a few key areas. So how do you plan? How do you save? How do you spend? How do you invest? How do you protect what you need to protect, right? And my approach is built around kind of three key pillars because I think you have to know some things. You have to have some knowledge, right? But I think the most important part is how does that knowledge apply to your own situation, right? Because not everything you will hear from your neighbor or your parent or a financial advisor, not everything will make sense, especially in the context of a creative entrepreneur or a creative career, right? So that awareness of how this information translates into your own creativity is huge. And then the third pillar is all about intention, right? How can you claim back some control so that you are more in control and more mindful and more intentional about the financial choices you're making instead of feeling like finances are just happening to you. If you can reclaim some of that control, then you can be more intentional and you win. Because if you never have to say yes to a project you'd rather say no to just for the money, that is total and complete creative freedom. And there are lots of different paths to get there. So my job is to work with all of my clients and my students and help them figure out what's the right path for them in order to accomplish their goals. Because all of our goals are different, all of our situations are different, we all have unique circumstances that influence what we do and what we care about. So if we can have a little knowledge, some awareness of how that knowledge relates to us, and then build our own intention, then you get the financial results you want. And that's what I'm all about, right? I would love to call myself a creative individual, right? I have some creative outputs, but my creativity is so minuscule in comparison to the creativity that's in this room, right? But what I can do is know and understand numbers and use that knowledge in support of your creativity so that you can change the world. And that, to me, makes me the luckiest CPA that has ever lived, right? I have so much more fun than all of my colleagues, right? And they're all fools for not doing this exact same work, right? Because I think economic literacy, financial literacy, I think it's the great equalizer. So that if we all have a little bit of that knowledge, awareness, intention, right, all of a sudden, we're all on the same playing field. And as we know, that's not always true where we start out. So what I wanted to talk about today was taking this idea of manifest, right? And I immediately thought of manifesto, right? A public declaration of aims. And I said, well, why not add money to it, right? Why not think about a public declaration of financial aims, right? So if we were to build our own personal money manifestos, what would that look like, right? So that's where I started, and I handed out some financial journals for everyone. I use these journals with my clients all the time, and you'll notice it's blank, right? Sometimes people ask me, like, where are all the secrets, right? Like, isn't it supposed to just tell me everything I need to know? And I wish it did, right? I wish there were just like 6 things I could tell you, and then you would be set for life. But it doesn't work that way. It's blank because you already have all of the answers. We just need to dig a little deeper and kind of find them. So what I challenge my clients to do is use these as outlets for financial expressions, right? Whether that means jotting down moments where you're encountering money, when you're being mindful about it, or where you're feeling icky about it, right? Or maybe it's sort of, real frustrations and you just need to get them out, right? If you sort of just start being a little bit more aware of your financial thoughts, feelings, intentions, right? We can build on that and then get to where you want to be financially in all those technical categories that all the other financial planners will talk to you about. So, our first category is planning. The first part of the manifesto says, I define financial outcomes that are consistent with my creative, personal, and professional goals, and then I achieve them. I think that's a powerful statement, right? Oftentimes, if you Google something like how to be a financial success or something like that, right, you'll see a debt to asset ratio, right? How much debt do you have, credit card debt or student loans or mortgage or any of that, and how does that compare to your overall assets, right? Does anyone think that's a useful measure of your own success? Yeah, me either, right? It's perfectly fine to be aware of that, right? And if you're applying for a loan or something like that, somebody in a suit is going to pull that number, right? So it's perfectly fine to be aware of that, but that's not your definition of success, and it shouldn't be. So I challenge you to define financial outcomes that are consistent with your creative, personal, and professional goals, and then achieve them. Right? Because someone else's outcomes won't matter to you, right? But if you define your own outcomes, maybe it's a balance in a savings account, right? Maybe it is starting a retirement fund. Maybe it is paying down your debt $10 a month, right? If you define the financial outcomes that will push you toward your own success, then we can figure out how to achieve them together. Joe Biden is also one of my heroes, not quite as much as Melissa, but I think he's pretty cool too. And Joe Biden once said, "Don't tell me what you value. Show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value." And I think that is so incredibly powerful. And I think when we start examining spending, and when we start examining how we spend our time, right, all of a sudden, there are plenty of hypocrites in the world, right? Because lots of people say, I really value fill in the blank. And then you look at their calendar. Are they putting their time to that cause or that issue? I care about my family so much, but I never see them. Really? Really? How do you reconcile that? And maybe you can, right? Maybe you say, I care about them so much, all I need to do is provide for them, and that's the most important thing. Great, but you have to be able to reconcile it, and you have to be aware if there is a disconnect, right? Same thing with your spending. Do you give to causes that are important to you? Do you say you do? Do you really, right? This idea that if you look at where you spend your money and where you spend your time, if you can figure out if those things align with your values, all of a sudden, you are taking steps toward being more mindful and more intentional about doing what you do in a more fulfilling way, right? Most people don't look at their budgets this way, right? Most people pay their utility bill and not think about it, right? Or pay their rent and not think about it. But if you can step back and say, I am paying this rent payment this month because it's important to me to live in this neighborhood or provide this for my family or fill in the blank, right? If you can say that, all of a sudden, your budget takes on new meaning. And that's really, really powerful. And that's a huge way of connecting your time and your money to things that matter to you. And if you can do that, then money isn't the enemy anymore. It's an expression of your values. We've heard all about the vendors who are in the marketplaces. Support them. Why? Because it's good to support local vendors and local artisans, but more importantly, that's an expression of your values, right? But don't just support them today when you need to buy a gift for an upcoming holiday or a birthday celebration or something. Find someone who can express your values and express your values through that spending. That's huge. Whoops, I fast-forwarded too much. I'm sorry, Marshall, I messed up. I'm gonna scooch back a smidge to earning. What I earn reflects my worth, and I can explain why. This is a powerful statement as part of the manifesto. Does anyone charge enough for their work? Not a single hand. Not a single hand, of course not, right? Because it's so personal and it feels so icky to charge what we're worth. And we might not even know what we're worth, right? That's really, really hard. And it's especially hard because if you just Google something like, how should I price my work? You'll get a formula that tells you to take all of your costs and divide it by your billable hours, and that's your hourly rate. Well, that's stupid. That doesn't have anything to do with the value you create for the world, right? Costs are important, right? We've already talked about spending and all that stuff. But the value you create for the world, your worth, is very, very different. And the sooner you can figure that out in the context of other people who are doing similar work, right? Plus the type of customers you want to be working with, plus your own unique skills that make you the most powerful, capable, able person to be doing what you're doing, the sooner you can tap into that, the better you can tell the story and explain why there's now an extra 0 at the end of your price, right? Because there probably should be. Most of the creative people I work with are undercharging by at least 60 to 70%, sometimes considerably more than that, right? That's huge. Saving is another really hard one, because saving money, protecting our future, requires us to balance our needs today against our needs tomorrow, right? Has anyone heard of those marshmallow tests that Walter Mischel did at Stanford University? I'm seeing some nods. This guy, Walter Mischel, did this experiment where he put a whole lot of kids in a room, right? And there was a big table full of treats, like cookies and, all sorts of other things. But marshmallows happened to be a treat. And so he asked them, if you can choose a treat, many of them chose marshmallow, he said, sit there with the marshmallow in front of you. I'm going to come back in 15 minutes. Don't eat the marshmallow. If you can wait, I'll give you 2 marshmallows at the end of 15 minutes. Otherwise, you can just ring the bell and just eat it right away, right? So then he filmed these kids. And to watch the torture of these, toddlers, basically, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, it's incredible. Because some of them would just stare at the marshmallow, right? And some of them would take a little nibble and then put it down. And then others were just like, forget it, I'm just gonna eat the marshmallow, right? And what he was tapping into is this idea of delayed gratification. Now, there are a ton of issues with this study. Number one, the people that change the world are the ones who don't necessarily believe the authority voice that says, I'm going to come back and you should wait, right? So some of my favorite clients never would have waited. They would have been like, screw you, I'm eating the marshmallow, right? And we need those people to change the world. So the idea that the standard of excellence is waiting for the second marshmallow is stupid, right? That should not be our standard of excellence. But if we are aware that there is this perception that here's this thing, can you wait? Is it worth it to wait? How do you navigate that, right? How do you balance the idea of delayed gratification versus your needs right now? Maybe you're hungry, right? Maybe you don't have the luxury to wait for the second marshmallow, right? There's so many things wrong with this study and so many things going into it, but that doesn't take away the point that there is this tension between what we do today and what we do tomorrow. And if you can figure out a way to navigate that tension by being cognizant about what you spend, making sure it's aligned with your values, by earning an amount that's commensurate with your worth, right? That is actually representative of the value you add to the world, maybe then there's a way to balance today and tomorrow a little bit better, right? Doesn't mean it's easy, right? It is the opposite of easy, right? But it's something we can think about a little bit. There's also a statement on here that says, my investments are right for me. I cannot tell you how many questions I get about investments. Should I have investments? Am I missing out on this big rich people game that I feel like I should be playing, right? Because it feels like this other world that everybody else gets to play in that maybe we can't because we struggle to pay today's bills. Or maybe we've opened up a separate individual retirement account, right? And we don't really know what choices to make and our money's just kind of hanging out there. Is that okay? Is it not okay? I don't want to ask anybody. I don't want to tell my employer that I have no idea what I'm doing here, right? It feels really icky and really uncomfortable. But investments are really just spendings for tomorrow. And so if your investment choices also align with your values, and if you come back to that over and over and over again, you will be okay, right? And it's an expression of risk and reward, and there's a balancing act there, and it's hard, and it's like the marshmallow that you want to eat, but you have to wait. Or should you wait? I don't know, right? It's really, really, really hard. But the sooner we start kind of thinking about it, building our knowledge about what a diversified investment portfolio means, right? And how we get one of those things, right? We build our knowledge, we build our awareness of what really fits into our lives, and we add our intention by aligning our investments with our values. All of a sudden, then, we are reclaiming control over our financial health. And that's huge, because if we have control, we win, right? There's a whole lot of things in the world we cannot control, right? And I love that we are working to change them and fighting all those things that we cannot control that are not okay. But until we win, right, then we can reclaim control and work within that system and still make progress. And that's really important. I protect what matters to me. What I love about this statement is that as creative individuals, you have much more to protect than most other humans on this planet. You have to protect your creativity. You have to protect the output of your brain. And there are some legal ways to do that, right? Patents, copyrights, trademarks, right? There are some kind of best practices about contracts or putting things in writing or things like that, right? But it's really hard to have those conversations and to know what to do in the middle of a really exciting brainstorming session. I was speaking with a friend not too long ago who said she knew the moment when she got screwed because it's when they started whiteboarding things, right? She was having a conversation with a client and they were at a conference table and things were going really well. And as soon as the whiteboard marker came out, right, she was like, oh, I knew it. That's the moment I got screwed, because that's the moment I should have stopped or paused or said, okay, well, let's just figure out who's going to own this thing. Because the end of the story is the person she was speaking with took a picture of the whiteboard and then ran off and did everything without her, right? And she knew she knew she got screwed in that exact moment, but she didn't have the vocabulary to know how to slow down the conversation and just say something like, I love where this is going. Let me just exhale for a second and let's figure out how we're gonna do this together, right? And what does that look like? And then write it down on a piece of paper and then follow up with an email, right? Because that is at least better than no contract. But if you don't have that vocabulary and that awareness and the intention of how to protect what you need to protect, right, then you can just get screwed. And sometimes that happens, right? I bet there are incredible stories of that happening probably in this room, but experience is the best teacher. And if we can find that vocabulary, know those best practices, and protect our creative output, right, that goes a long way to protecting our financial health. Because if you are protecting your creative output, you're probably getting paid for it. And you're probably getting paid what it's worth, right, by adding that extra zero. And that helps spending with intention, saving for tomorrow, all those other things that we know we should be doing. Within protection, it's also important to talk about insurance. And this has been all over the news lately with the tension that many people in Houston were feeling between not being able to pay for flood insurance and now faced with this huge catastrophe of Hurricane Harvey. I expect we'll hear many of the same stories coming out of Florida after Irma passes through, right? This idea that there are protections available in the form of insurance, but they're not always affordable. And again, balancing that tension between today and tomorrow and what might happen and what absolutely will happen if you don't pay your utility bill is really, really hard. But increasing your knowledge and your awareness and your intention can help you navigate that really tough tension there, right? And it won't always be perfect and you won't always navigate it flawlessly, right? And that's where there are lots of resources that you can draw upon for help. Creative people or creative individuals often use Fractured Atlas, which is one of my favorite resources for low-cost creative insurance. Another one, the CERF, the Craft Emergency Relief Fund, based out of Vermont, is an incredible resource for emergency loans and emergency grants for crafters in particular, but this can also apply to things in your studio. If you don't have studio insurance or renter's insurance, or your renter's insurance doesn't cover your really fancy camera because it's outside of the normal insurance parameters and you don't have an extra rider, which is another silly insurance insider word that just means extra coverage for a thing that might not normally be covered, right? So the idea of kind of navigating that protection landscape is really, really tough. But you can do it with some knowledge, some awareness, and some intention. The other big secret about insurance that no one talks about is that if you decline to purchase insurance, what you're basically choosing to do is self-insure. You are choosing to pay for your own restart after some sort of catastrophe, right? And that's tough. That's really, really tough. It's a perfectly fine choice to make, but it should be a choice you make with intention instead of a choice of omission because you just weren't able to pay for insurance, right? And so that idea of understanding, if I don't do this, what does that mean? That's a huge part of understanding your landscape, right? And so basically, these are the tenets of financial planning. You plan, you spend, you have some awareness, your spending aligns with your values, right? You earn, you save, and you protect. Those are the key areas within any good, solid financial plan. And if you can figure out a way to move yourself towards this money manifesto by saying with authority that all of these statements can apply to you, then you'll be well on your way to achieving total and complete financial freedom. The last category is one of my favorites. It's not part of the official financial planning process, but I think it's important. I am not afraid of what I don't know, what I think I know, or what I'm certain doesn't apply to me. Don't be afraid of a little extra knowledge, right? Especially if you think it doesn't apply to you. I can't tell you how many creative people I work for or work with that say, oh, I don't save for retirement, I'm never going to retire. Yes, that's probably true. You will keep creating until the end of time, and that's amazing. But if you also have a little pocket of money that you can draw upon, then you can keep creating the way you want to create. You don't have to keep creating in the exact same way. Maybe you want to do something a little different. Maybe you don't want to do the type of work that pays the bills and the type of work you want to do. Maybe you want to let go of that. Maybe that's your retirement. I'm using air quotes because that's not a real retirement, but that's fine, right? That's still saving for retirement, and that's still something you can do to reclaim that power. So be careful of what you don't know, what you think you know, and what you're certain doesn't apply to you. That's my time. Please enjoy the Money Manifesto. Thank you.
So any questions for Elaine? This is your time to get free CPA advice, trust me. Yes.
Thank you for your talk. I want to go back to what you were saying about value.
Yeah.
The simple formula doesn't really address the value.
Yep.
If I'm talking to a client, what are sort of like the touch points that I can activate when I'm talking to them, speaking value?
So tell me about the kind of work you do.
I design and build websites.
Design and build websites. Okay. So in that context, I imagine a client might reach out to you, or you might reach out to them and just say, hey, your website could use some work, or, so they might say, I saw your work, it's amazing, the work you did for this other client, can we talk, right? So what I would do is spend as much time in that initial free consult meeting, right, understanding what matters to the client. Right? Because if you understand what they care about, is it more traffic? Is it clicks in a certain spot? Is it kind of professionalizing their appearance, right? Then as you're building out your proposal, right, following that initial free consult kind of meeting, they've basically told you exactly what they value, and then you can deliver it via your proposal. And in the case of web designers or other creative work, I really love the idea of breaking out a proposal into a couple of different buckets. So for a web design client, they're going to need some pages, right? So you kind of build that out, and maybe there's a design. Maybe they also need a new logo or kind of a refresh. That could be a separate part. But then maybe they also need a PowerPoint slide template or a letterhead or some business cards, things that kind of derive from the website that are small follow-up moments, right? I'd include those broken out separately in the proposal as well, so that even if they say, no, we don't want that, right? By the time you work with them a little bit, they might say, oh man, that would be really nice, right? And then it's a little add-on and a couple of extra $100 or so. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
You were talking about protecting what matters. There were a few companies you mentioned that for like emergency loans and things like that.
Yes. Surf Plus, C-E-R-F. And I think the website is surfplus.org, I'm pretty sure. And CERF, C-E-R-F, stands for Craft Emergency Relief Program. And they give emergency loans to creative individuals who are flooded out of their studios or something happens. And it's all kind of microfinanced by the surf community, which is really cool. They also have unbelievable resources on their website for navigating insurance options and questions to ask and things like that. The other company I mentioned was Fractured Atlas. I love Fractured Atlas. They do a lot of really cool work in the arts, and one thing they do is short-term creative insurance policies. So if you are having a performance in a space, right, and the host requires you to have insurance, or you are shipping work for a gallery show, right, and you need a short-term insurance policy to insure the work while it's in transit, right, Fractured Atlas has lots of really affordable short-term options to help you with that. And also on their website, they have a ton of really good resources that can help you answer great questions. Another insurance person to reach out to is whoever you're currently having any type of insurance through, right? So if you work with State Farm or Geico or Allstate or any of those other insurance companies for your car insurance or your home insurance or your renter's insurance or anything like that, reach out to them and just say, do you have any small business insurance policies you can talk to me about, right? And if you're doing consulting work, you probably want some kind of, errors and omissions type of insurance. If you do physical work, you might need some kind of liability insurance. And if you already have a relationship with a company, then they can give you probably a pretty good deal on a little small, teeny tiny add-on that wouldn't be obscenely expensive. Yeah. Another question.
What's your opinion on like crowdfunding versus loan?
So pros and cons. The question is about crowdfunding versus loans, microfinancing. And there is a full gamut of options there. The benefit of crowdfunding is that you don't have to pay it back, right? You do have to deliver on what you promised to deliver, right? So there is a quid pro quo embedded in there. But if you have a solid community, right, and especially if that community knows another layer of the community, then crowdfunding can be a really great option. Crowdfunding is also a good option if you want to kind of beta test something. Like, you're not really sure if this idea is going to work. Let's see if it has some traction, right? Crowdfunding can be a good way to kind of test an idea. The problem with crowdfunding is it's not sustainable, right? It's really good for a one-time thing, but you can't crowdfund your entire existence, right? Crowdfunding is also taxable, by the way, so make sure you're aware of that, and don't forget to pay taxes on that crowdfunding income, right? And people get into trouble with this, especially if their crowdfunding campaign spans years. So if you're raising money in like December, but you're not gonna have any of the expenses associated with that project until January or February, guess what? All that money is taxable to you in December before you have any expenses to reduce that taxable income. That's a problem. So don't crowdfund in December is the takeaway, right? Not that I'm giving you tax advice as part of this educational summit, right? But don't crowdfund in December. So that's kind of a problem with crowdfunding. When it comes to microfinancing, whether we're talking about a small business loan through SBA or ECDI or even your bank or credit union or a platform like Kiva, there are a lot of really positive aspects to that as well, but it's a harder hurdle to clear, right? So it's much harder to get a small business loan just because the metrics are different. All of those metrics for success, right? They are measuring slightly different metrics for success than you might be. But you can still get small business financing, but it's helpful if you have a viable product and a proven business plan so that you can say to Mr. Banker Dude, who doesn't understand anything about the creative lifestyle, this is why the idea is gonna work, and this is why I am not at all risky. Look, I'm active in the community. I'm not going anywhere, right? I have great support because I've demonstrated through, web traffic or attendance at events or whatever that there is a market for this thing, and I need some support to take it to the next level, and here's what that looks like, right? So building all of that out in a really compelling way can be a better longer-term strategy if you're going for microfinancing or a small business loan. You can also microfinance yourself, right? That day job you have that's mostly just to pay the bills, if you keep it for a few extra months and instead of paying the bills, right, if you pay yourself into small emergency reserve fund, before you know it, you'll raise a couple $1,000s to start your own business and be your own microfinancer, right? Now, I am not pretending that's easy. It is insanely hard to do, but it's another option.
All right, thank you. Give Elaine a round of applause.